Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin with some breaking news tonight. New comments tonight from the president when asked if he's going to fire special counsel Robert Mueller or Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. At a press conference at Mar-a-Lago, the president was asked whether he's concluded that it's not worth the political fallout to remove them. Now, this is how his answer began.
There was no collusion, and that's been so found, as you know, by the House Intelligence Committee. There's no collusion.
So that's how he began and went on for quite a while. Now, keeping him honest, as long as he keeps saying that, we'll keep saying this. The Mueller investigation is not over. We don't know what it will find. As for the House Intelligence Committee, as you know, that was a Republican-controlled committee whose investigation dissolved with the Republicans saying there was no collusion, but the Democrats saying there was more work to do. And it was chaired by Devin Nunes, who was caught not telling the truth about his relationship with the White House as it related to aspects of the Russia investigation. As for the president's response to the actual question about firing Mueller and Rosenstein, here's what he said.
As far as the two gentlemen you told me about, they've been saying I'm going to get rid of them for the last 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and they're still here. So we want to get the investigation over with, done with, put it behind us.
Well, it is true that Mueller and Rosenstein are still there, but that doesn't really answer whether or not he's concluded it's not worth the political fallout to fire each of them. And as we know, fortunes and minds can change in a heartbeat in this White House. Now, this is actually the second time today the president has mentioned the Russia investigation and its surrounding drama. As former FBI Director James Comey continued media interviews this morning for his new book, the president was doing a little writing himself, or rewriting, as it were, rewriting the reason why he, the president, chose to put the former FBI director. This morning, the president tweeted, quote, "Slippery James Comey, the worst FBI director in history, was not fired because of the phony Russia investigation, where, by the way, there was no collusion except by the Dems." Now, you have to admit, for one tweet, it kind of scratches a fair amount of the presidential itches. There's a nickname, there's the ever-popular all-caps no collusion, and most importantly, a totally different version of events from what the president has previously said. Keeping him honest, we know the president fired James Comey because of the Russia investigation. Now, when I say we know it, I mean we know it as much as we can know anything the president says. In other words, we know he said it. Whether it's true, that's an entirely different story. But we know he said it. He said very clearly that he fired Comey because of the Russia investigation, and we know he said it because there was a camera there pointing right at him.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
So that was in May of 2017, right after he fired Comey, attributing his decision to the Russia investigation. Today, he says he didn't fire him because of the Russia investigation. If there were anyone else involved in this, some other administration official who was saying something contradictory to the president, we'd say it was a messaging problem, that, you know, the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. But this is just the president directly contradicting himself. It's like the left hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, or the left hand is lying, or the left hand is betting that there are enough people who only care about the latest version of whatever he's saying. Truth and consistency be damned. Also, it wasn't just what he said to Lester Holt a day after he fired Comey. The president also made it very clear why when he met with Russian officials in the Oval Office. According to reporting in the New York Times, he told the Russians that he had just fired the head of the FBI, who he described as crazy and a real nut job, and said, quote, "I face great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off." Now, that came from a document summarizing the meeting, which was read to the New York Times by an American official. No American reporters were allowed in that meeting. Even these photos came from a Russian news agency. So keeping them honest, it comes down to what you believe. Do you believe what the president said on national television at the time, what he also said to the Russian officials the day after he fired Comey, or what he tweeted this morning? On The View today, Comey was asked why he thinks he was fired.
I don't know. I took him at his word when he told that to Lester Holt, and I read in the media that he also said that privately to the Russians the next day in the Oval Office. So I took him at his word. Today's tweet, which I've seen, I don't follow him on Twitter, but I've seen the tweet. Both of those things can't be true. I actually think that illustrates part of the problem that I'm trying to bring up, that it matters that the president is not committed to the truth as a Central American value. But so I don't know what to make of it.
Well, that brings up another possibility, the danger in taking this president at his word, and the possibility that the president simply can't keep his own story straight, which is a somewhat troubling notion, as those who don't remember or don't care about the truth of their own history are prone to rewrite it. Joining me now is CNN national security analyst and New York Times national security correspondent Matthew Rosenberg. Matthew, as we just heard, the president stared down a camera a year ago, explained in his own words why he fired Comey. The idea that he would just revise that reasoning now, as if the rest of us don't remember it, seems kind of incredible.
I mean, there's a lot about the Trump presidency that seems incredible. We're not even 2 years into the thing yet. And I think what we're seeing here and what we saw in that Oval Office meeting that you made reference to was this really unusual friendliness towards Russia that isn't always easy to explain, and we're still seeing it. We saw it in this refusal to kind of implement the latest round of sanctions. And I think, you know, there's a relationship here that we don't fully understand, or it isn't fully explainable, and the president's never really fully explained it. And Comey seems to have been caught up on the wrong side of that to a degree. I
mean, we found out, it was from your reporting with others at the New York Times, that the president met with Russian officials the day after he fired Comey and pretty much echoed what he had said in that interview.
I mean, he said that he told the Russian ambassador and the Russian foreign minister that firing Comey had relieved great pressure on him. He called Comey a nut job. I don't think the president ever imagined that these comments would get out to the wider public. There were 12 pages of typewritten notes taken by a note taker in that room. And there was a lot in that meeting. He also shared incredibly sensitive, classified intelligence with the Russians as well. And so, you know, we're in this weird position where the president, when he has time to think about what he's saying, says, well, I didn't fire Comey. You know, when he's premeditated about it, he goes, well, he points to the Hillary investigation and other issues. But when he's in a private moment or when he lashes out, then it's, I fired Comey because of the Russia investigation. I didn't want it. I wanted it over, and firing him kind of relieved the pressure on that. It didn't in the end because we now have Robert Mueller. But I think he thought so at the time that it was going to relieve the pressure.
What was so interesting about his Russia comments back then was that it contradicted, you know, the day Comey was fired. I mean, I was on the air that night, and a lot of White House folks, I interviewed Kellyanne Conway, you know, were pushed out in front of cameras in order to say that, you know, he was fired because basically the way he had treated Hillary Clinton. That was the initial narrative that they were pushing. And then the president reversed that in that interview and also with what he had said to the Russians. And then I just interviewed a White House official, I think it was like 2 nights ago, who said a whole new reason, which I never heard someone from the White House saying, and maybe I just missed it, but this White House official the other night was saying on the air that the reason Comey was fired because Comey leaked information, which seems a whole new reason that just kind of they've suddenly popped up with.
Yeah, this White House is not great at staying on message. I think what we saw that first night when Comey was fired was that they had agreed upon what the message was, and that there were a number of officials, the general counsel, a lot of people that were involved in making that decision and shaping how it was going to be presented. But as Trump is wont to do, he gets out there on his own the next day and he says what's on his mind. What was on his mind was the Russia investigation.
It's been nearly a year since the president first went on record about all this. Do you have a sense of why he would kind of go down this road again? I mean, obviously he wants to respond to Comey because he can't help himself, I guess.
I think it's the continuing Russia investigation itself, which it infuriates him. It's Comey out there talking about it, questioning his integrity, questioning his honesty. And then he looks at Jim Comey and says, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to fight back. And, you know, Trump has built a reputation as somebody who likes to fight back, who likes to play tough. And so when he's being called out as he sees it, he's going to respond.
Yeah. Matthew Rosenberg, appreciate it. Thanks very much. Joining me now are criminal defense attorney Alan Dershowitz, author of Trumped Up, How Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy, and CNN chief legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Professor Dershowitz, I mean, the president's changing story on why he fired James Comey, saying it wasn't about Russia, which is what he said to Lester Holt that it was about just days after it actually happened. I mean, shouldn't he stick to one story?
He should stick to no stories. He shouldn't say anything about it. But it's obvious that the effort was to end the Russia investigation. I mean,
and that's okay, in your opinion?
Well, it's not okay. I think it's not illegal. I don't think it's a crime because the president does have the authority under a unitary executive theory to tell his attorney general, I want you to investigate this, but not that. Thomas Jefferson said, I want you to put Aaron Burr in jail. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, I want you to put the Nazi saboteurs in the electric chair. I don't want you to investigate that. That should change. That's not okay. But it's not illegal today under the law.
It sure is. I mean, this is a fundamental disagreement that Alan and I have, that you know, all those examples of setting investigative priorities are certainly within the president's power. But if the president fires the FBI director to stop him from investigating the president himself, that is a corrupt motive. That is the definition of obstruction
so
of justice.
The intent matters.
The intent is the whole story.
Well, that's the point. It's the whole thing. You never can have a crime where the intent is the whole thing. You have to have an illegal act. And you can't have an illegal act when the president acts within his constitutional authority.
But Alan, you're
metaphysically,
making that up.
you can't have an act that is both constitutionally authorized under Article 1, under Article 2, and at the same time is criminal. And you must have an actus reus. You must have an illegal act. And it would undercut the power of the president to start questioning why he pardoned, why he fired. Once he did it and it's within his authority, you can't question him, just like you can't question a senator for his vote on the Senate floor, and you can't question a judge for their vote in the Supreme Court.
Their laws are full of examples of acts that are otherwise legal,
not by presidents,
but made illegal by the intent. Insider trading being a perfect example. But I mean, you have said this, that the president, you know, has this unfettered ability to act. But what's the authority for that? I mean, this unitary theory. I mean, that's a controversial theory that not everybody agrees with.
But take, for example, insider trading. The act is trading, having information that you obtained improperly and illegally. So that's the act. But I know of no case. They purposely did not impeach Clinton. They did not impeach Nixon. They did not try to impeach Bush. All of them engaged in acts, particularly Bush, with an alleged corrupt motive. He pardons all these people, Caspar Weinberger, in order to end the investigation that was going to lead to him.
On his last day in office.
No, but that was the conclusion done by the special prosecutor. And nobody suggested, nobody, no historian, no lawyer, that President Bush committed a crime or an impeachable offense by engaging in a pardon to stop an investigation of himself.
I want to move to another legal matter, which is the Michael Cohen situation, that the president, Michael Cohen, their teams are going to be able to review, it seems like, some of these documents. How difficult is it going to be for the defense to prevent at least a good part of these documents from actually being used by the FBI?
It's going to be impossible, and it should be impossible, because attorney-client privilege is a narrow privilege, and it applies only to certain communications when there is an actual attorney-client relationship. And I think the judge is setting up a sensible system where there will be a review of these documents to see whether any are covered by the attorney-client privilege, and those will be excluded, and that's proper, but most of these documents will not be excluded.
You'll recall that I made that suggestion on this show, and Jeffrey said it was a terrible idea.
I didn't say it was a terrible idea.
I thought it would be
it was
a waste
unnecessary.
of time and unnecessary.
I still do, but it's
now,
not a bad
suddenly
idea.
It's a good idea.
Well,
I still think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Look, you're going to have a judge or somebody assigned by the judge to look through the papers, and I hope he's right. If there's nothing that's lawyer-client privilege here, let the prosecutors see it all, let them prosecute. But if they find communications between a lawyer and a client that are legitimate, no FBI agent should get to see that and leak it.
Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jeff Toobin as well. Thanks.